Empire. A devastating injury makes the Cowboys' start to the season even more disappointing. What's up, everybody? It's Mike Jones. Thanks for coming back for another episode of the Football Jones podcast. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And today we're talking about Dak Prescott's injury, loss for the season after the fracture and dislocation of his ankle. Helping me break it down is Jori Epstein, my colleague from USA Today Sports, who covers the Cowboys down there in Dallas. She's going to tell us what it means for Dak, what the reaction from his teammates and his team were, what it means for them going forward, and how they can get out of this slump that they've started the season in, and the challenges that they face as they are, gotten off to a slow start under new coach Mike McCarthy. They were expected to be a contender this year. He was expected or hired with the expectation that he was going to help them move to the next level, and instead started the season 1-3. Then on Sunday, as they're trying to come back and win against the Giants, Dak goes down with injury. They do wind up holding on to win that game, but now the road gets much more challenging, and for Dak, who is playing on the franchise tag, this injury creates a lot of uncertainty. And so now we're going to get into it with Jori. All right, here we are with Jori Epstein, fellow USA Today sports teammate, covers the Cowboys, among other things, but we're definitely have you on because we're talking Dak Prescott. Take me inside the press box. What was the reaction, and how quickly did you guys realize that how serious it was yesterday?
Yeah, AT&T Stadium was just, there was shock yesterday while we were there. It was surreal. I think that all of us reporters, we've spent we're on our 5th season working with Dak. I think the league knows pretty well who he is on and off the field and how much he's overcome. And so you feel like you have a very personal relationship, understanding what it means for someone like this. And it was tough. We saw him go down, and that's the thing. Like, Dak is not someone who misses a couple games here and there. That was his 69th straight start every single game since Dallas drafted him in 2016 at the 135th pick. He's gotten his high school, college, and NFL jobs because someone went down and Dak came in and never gave up these jobs. And so for it to happen to Dak, it just felt so surreal, and it just sort of put into perspective everything we'd been worried about, or the team had been worried about a couple days prior, of like Tyron Smith's out for the season, Blake Jarwin's out. And again, not to discount what those guys are dealing with at all, but it was really surreal. And then, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, the press box announcer comes over and says Dak Prescott has suffered a, quote, serious right ankle injury, and they mentioned that he was on his way to the hospital. Before long, we were hearing he was undergoing surgery that night. Compound fracture, dislocation. They needed to wash the wound and fix the fracture. This was some serious stuff, and it wasn't something that looked bad, but you'll reevaluate in a couple days. This was something that we were at the stadium knowing this is serious.
Yeah, and you could just, I don't know how anybody could watch his emotions and not feel something. And I felt like, as you saw Twitter with other players just jumping on social media and sending him well wishes and everything. This is a guy who's very well respected among his peers. He's a young guy, but people respect him. Where do you think that all came from? Is it because of his durability? Is it because he's in Dallas in the spotlight? Or where was it that he commanded such respect? I know he's a 2-time Pro Bowler, so he has met a lot of these, other stars at those type of events and things like that. But where does it stem from?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I was saying the same thing. I'm like, I get that guys don't want to see other guys go down, and I think Dak is a really good quarterback. but he's not a Super Bowl winner. He's not Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady, or he hasn't accomplished on the field what they have before. But I think that the absolute gem of a human being and leader that he has been off the field, combined with the fact that he is really good and was on pace for a record-setting year, leading the league in passing yards going into the season, resetting all of these records that just felt fake. And Dak said, "Oh, I'd trade the stats for wins." And to see a guy who has such a bright career ahead of him, a contract year with such implications, and who has just inspired so many people, I think that's where it came from. Because, I mean, that was another thing we obviously know, or a lot of people listening to this probably know, Dak has overcome the loss of his mother to colon cancer in college. His brother died by suicide this spring. He dealt with anxiety and depression in the offseason. He didn't get the contract. And now here he is, like, football is his escape, and he's lost that for the time being. And he's been really vocal about the mental health stuff and sort of shifted the conversation this season about what it means to be strong, and that you can be strong and admit you're not okay. And I think that guys really related to that, because every single game, opponents were coming up to him after the game and thanking him for that. And Baker Mayfield and all of these other guys were saying, "Hey, we respect him so much." And I think that the spotlight he has and the way he's grown to just absolutely embody it to make the world a better place, without sounding cliche, but I really do believe that he's done that. I think that's where the respect came from.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Okay, obviously, the injury is sad and concerning, and we'll get into the other stuff. But when you talk about the mental health aspect of it, guys always say that, like, one of the most difficult aspects of an injury is the isolation, being
Right.
away from their teammates, not being in those meetings, not being in the locker room, not being in those practices, because they're so used to that camaraderie, and then not having it. That's really unfortunate for him. From what you've gathered, what is his support system like? And how do you imagine that he'll get through something like this? Obviously, like you said, he's lost his mother, he's lost his brother. So he's been through tragedy and dealt with that. But how do you think he'll deal with this injury?
Right. It's a good question. I was looking at Tony Romo's, what we call his concession speech this morning, which was Tony entering the 2016 fractures his collarbone, I believe it was at that time. Hard to keep track of all of it. And Dak takes over. They end up going 13-3 that season. Tony doesn't get his job back. So about November of 2016, when Jerry Jones had still been sowing some, are we going to give Tony back this job? Are we not? Tony ends up giving a speech and being like, "Look, this is Dak's team, and I'm going to support him." But one of the things he said is that he was describing the emotions of what it was like seeing you lose your team. And he said that, quote, "Coaches are sympathetic, but they still have to coach, and you're not there. It's a dark place, probably the darkest it's ever been. You're sad and down and out, and you ask yourself, why did this have to happen?" And I think, there's more to that speech, but that's what goes through my mind. Thank God Dak has told us he's worked with a sports psychologist on his mental health. I think that he will find a sense of purpose in the rehab, because it's something you can do actively. Like, one of the things that was so hard for him at the beginning of quarantine is he felt like he couldn't do what he needed to do to make himself and those around him better. He couldn't lead. He couldn't go out and volunteer. He wasn't with his teammates. He did later in the summer he was, but I think he has a good support system. He's got a good team of guys who have worked with him on the endorsement side. He did lose one brother in the spring, but his other brother, Tad, and his dad have moved to North Texas so they could all be nearby in the same part of town. And Tad actually posted a picture to Twitter from the hospital with Dak last night, which, it was really good to see that, because, again, this is the type of injury where you worry about the player first. Then to see Dak with his red puffy eyes smiling through the picture, and Tad's captioning it, "God is good. He'll be back stronger than ever. I effing guarantee it. Let's go, Dak. Continue to walk by faith, and I'll make sure you continue to fight." It was a little reassuring to me knowing he had that support. But again, I also think, and I'm sure you've seen this with all the teams you've been visiting, Mike, this is a tough year to have an injury, because it's not just like anyone who wants rehabbing at the facility. There are COVID concerns with every person you introduce and everywhere Dak goes for PT or rehab. So I'm not saying he won't be at the facility, but I asked McCarthy about that as it relates to Tyron Smith on Friday, and it's not as easy as guys just sticking around all the time. So I just hope that the team, especially given they don't have a long-term financial commitment to him at the moment, steps up and makes sure he's still around them. I have no doubt that guys like Ezekiel Elliott and Michael Gallup will.
Gotcha. And okay, so, that was my next thing I was going to ask is that's the other thing of why this thing hurt so bad was the fact that you knew that Dak was betting on himself. 2 years now, he's had to play without long-term financial security. Jerry Jones won the hometown bargain type of thing. Throwing out all kinds of disrespectful little jabs over whether he's the quarterback, whether he's elite, is he as good as Tony Romo or anybody else, and then, you're kind of pulling. I know people who weren't Cowboys fans who were pulling for Dak because they knew he stood up to the man, he was betting on himself and was trying to cash in, prove that he was elite so that way he could take care of himself and his family long term. And then he gets hurt on this franchise tag. And, when you're coming off of injury, a lot of times that will reduce your leverage that you have there. So that was just like a kick to the stomach. I know for fans and for players that I texted with. What have you heard about Cowboys players and how much of that status, that contract status kind of, hurt them as well, knowing it for Dak?
Oh, it hurt. And that was the thing. You say Cowboys players, which they were hurting, and Zeke talked about how hard it was to see a warrior like that go down, knowing what this team means to Dak. But what was amazing to me is Giants safety Logan Ryan, who tackled Dak on that play. And again, it was not a malicious tackle. It was very routine. It was freak injury. They got tangled up. But Logan was talking after the game, and they're like, what was the worst thing that happened today? And it wasn't that the Giants dropped to 0-5. I mean, obviously he takes pride in the game, but he was like, I just feel terrible what happened to Dak. He's a hell of a player. And he goes, he's scratching and clawing with one contract on his deal to try and get rewarded and do the right thing. He's trying to show up and get that lucrative contract. So that's why I feel like that. And Logan Ryan said, I hope he gets $500 million when he comes back. He deserves it. And he's been through injury, knows what it feels like. So this is, most of Dak's teammates were very frustrated, and they're just like, look, Dak has already been through so much on and off the field, but even his opponents were rooting for him to get that contract. And again, this isn't a quarterback who's trying to get the market reset from. This is the guy who tackled him. So yeah, it's tough. Cowboys Vice President Stephen Jones said on radio Monday that absolutely not did the plan change for Dak to be the franchise quarterback. Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner and general manager, sent a statement late Sunday night saying that they can't wait for Dak to return to the sense of purpose and leadership he holds with the team. But talk is cheap.
Yeah, right.
Quarterback contracts are not. And let's see what happens come March.
Yeah, and that was the thing is my stance was Dak should have never been in this position. Obviously you can't help getting hurt, but Jerry Jones should not have put him in this position. He exceeded expectations as a rookie, outplayed Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Okay, Jared Goff did make it to the Super Bowl, but otherwise he has outplayed those guys, I would say, for the length of their careers, because he's been more durable than Wentz. From the start of his career till now, he's been more consistent than Jared Goff is. You got this guy as a 4th-round pick. Reward him accordingly to what he did. And, you see everybody else around Dak is getting taken care of, and he hadn't gotten taken care of.
Right.
And now Jerry wants to talk about, his grit and knowing that young man and what he's made of and everything. Well, why didn't they pay him before now? Why didn't they take care of him? And that was the thing when I saw Stephen Jones, I guess it was his wife he was hugging or somebody that
Sister,
he was shooken up. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, I guess, even if he had been paid, you guys would have been shooken up. But I wonder if there's a little bit of remorse or guilt in the back of their minds that they hadn't taken care of this guy who was a stand-up guy, never complained, never got into any kind of trouble or anything like that. Was a good face of the franchise, played his heart out all the time. And why they hadn't shown him yet what he meant to them.
Right. And so if you asked me a week or two ago, it was weird. Certainly the Cowboys defense has showed us it needs help and it needs more investment. I do think that as they continue to learn the scheme, and we saw even a little bit of improvement yesterday, that the defense will improve, but it needs help. So you could say, well, Dak, if we give you this money, we can't get you the defense that's going to get you a deep playoff run. But other than that, Dak was the first quarterback in NFL history to rush for 3 touchdowns and pass for 450 yards in a game in their week 2 win. He threw for 450 yards plus in the last 3 games. No one had ever done that before. So, I mean, he was having a record season and showing I'm worth it and I'll rise to this level, even though my right tackle is out for the season, even though my left tackle, who's a multiple-time All-Pro, is out for the season, and even though my All-Pro center has retired. So, I mean, it wasn't just someone was relying, like it wasn't Dak was letting Zeke carry the team. Dak was carrying this team in the locker room and on the field. What's tricky now, so if you asked me a week ago, I would say, yeah, Dak's got the leverage. He's shown that he can do this. And if Deshaun Watson is getting that money with the way that team started, even though I think Deshaun's a great quarterback too, then Dak should be getting that money. Now it's tricky because before it was like, well, even if they didn't give him the contract yet, they'd at least give him the $37.7 million franchise tag for 2021, right? And now that's a hefty number in a year that it seems like the salary cap will dip some due to COVID, or certainly not rise. And you're giving it to a guy who's not going to be able to prove to you he can play at a healthy level before he comes back. So, I mean, I will say that the Cowboys took a chance on Jalen Smith when he had the gruesome injury because they're like, our doctors did the surgery. We know the prognosis. And now here 5 years later, Jalen's playing for them still. But it hurts Dak's leverage because they also might say, we can't do this franchise tag. And I mean, I don't know, like, would they try and say, what if we match your salary from 2020 for a year? And if you prove it to us, you can do it again. Like, I think the leverage is really, really tricky now. And unfortunately, it's shifted heavily towards the Cowboys because, yeah, Dak will get paid somewhere else. But I mean, he bought a home here. He built a football field in his back. I mean, he moved his family here. He wants to be here, but he just wants to get fair market value. And fair market value, unfortunately, changed on Sunday.
If they do not pay this man after that, I mean, if they try to match his salary or if they try to tag him again, I mean, I'm not even a Cowboys fan, but like I can just imagine the frustration on the parts of the diehards that to see, and even the players to see this guy wasn't rewarded accordingly to what he gave to the organization.
I have a question for you, actually. You watch this. I mean, you've been right there with all of this Alex Smith going on. God willing, what happens to Dak right now does not get to the point of Alex Smith. I'm glad they treated him with a sterile dressing before he even left the field, took him straight to surgery. But when you look at that, I mean, how do you gauge, should Dak be able to fully recover from what you've seen from some of these other guys who suffer injury? Because we have seen other guys suffer injury and recovery here, but I don't know why. It just feels, I think just the magnitude of what's at stake for Dak just makes me more nervous.
Well, I had texted with some players, RG3 being one of them, because he had a dislocated ankle himself. I think that was end of 2013, maybe, or 2014. I can't remember which one it was. Now, his was not fractured and dislocated, but the recovery from that, like if this was like a knee blown out or something like that, I would be more worried for him. But even so, now we see guys come back from ACLs like it's nothing now, the way they expected it. Being that it's the ankle and the fact that Dak has been durable, it hasn't been something, I expect that, I mean, I'm no doctor, but just from what I've seen guys seem like they come back from ankle injuries and stuff like that. Now, that's not to say that it won't hamper him a little bit, but the good thing for him is that he's not Lamar Jackson, who relies on his speed and elusiveness and everything. Yes, he can run, but he stands in that pocket and makes plays. And so I feel like if he's close to healthy in March, when they come back to the negotiation table, he's acting like, okay, I'm healthy now. Pay me. You saw I was off to a record-setting start. You saw what I can do in this offense, and you've seen what I can do from the whole course of my career.
you start all over? You let me go? You got to start all over with somebody else? I mean, what's the guarantee that that guy is going to be a long-term answer when you know what I can give you? Um,
Right.
so I think that he should be in good situation. And who knows? I mean, I don't know what Andy Dalton's going to do in this offense. I mean, he's a veteran guy, but maybe this will show Dak's worth even more
Right.
if the offense has a drop off or whatever. Now, have you heard anything? I've seen a couple reports that say like 4 to 6 months.
Right.
One guy I talked to said that he had somebody, a teammate, that his was like 6 to 10 months of
Mm,
recovery. Now, again, all of these injuries are different.
right.
So no one is just the same. Do we have any type of idea now, more than what we did last night, on what kind of a timeline he's looking at?
Right. So thankfully, the Cowboys confirmed on Monday that he's out of surgery. It was successful, whatever that means, and that he is scheduled to be discharged from the hospital today. I think what's tricky, and obviously, again, Alex Smith is like the worst case version of this, is it's not just about did the surgery go successfully, but like what happens in the coming days. So it's just too early to know for sure. 4 to 6 months is the expected timeline. But I think a lot of what the coming days, weeks, and even month or two brings will really tell us more the extent of this rehab. But given the nature of where we are in the season, it seems almost certain there is no Dak Prescott for the 2020 season, but he is expected to make a full recovery for the 2021 season. And doctors do think he will make a full recovery. And Stephen Jones said that he could come back better and stronger than ever. So from everything we're hearing right now, that's kind of where it is. And obviously the fact that this happened when it did makes that timeline February versus March. It matters to Dak, and I want him back as soon as possible. But he's got a little bit of wiggle room because it will hit in the off season.
Gotcha. Do you know what all they did in the surgery? Did they explain to you? You know how sometimes they'll explain,
Right.
this many screws inserted or whatever. Did they tell you guys?
So they haven't yet told us the extent of the exact screws, et cetera. What we do know is that, so he had what they call a compound fracture and dislocation of his right ankle. So you're shivering, but for the people out there, might cover your ears. The bone was exposed. So before he even left, and I mean, you can see on that replay, he's like trying to get it back into place because Warrior Dak is like, it's out of place. Like, I'm a solution guy. Let's see what we can do. That being said, so they splinted him with a sterile dressing before he even left. Ambulance was waiting as they rolled him back into the tunnel, took him immediately with the Cowboys team doctors to the hospital where one of their specialist consultants performed the surgery with the goal of washing the wound and fixing the fracture. So, they did say, my understanding is there was some ligament reconstruction, but I don't know the exact techniques they used yet.
Gotcha. So what now? Obviously he's got to wait to the off season. He's got to get healthy. They got to, and then they have to do the right thing by him. I'm saying they got to do the right thing and take care of him financially.
Right.
But what about the Cowboys?
Right.
Do you think, is this offense? I don't know if you even saw enough out of what's his face, Andy Dalton. No. And their defense, like obviously, this puts even more pressure on that defense. What are your expectations for this team that's now 2-3?
Yes. NFC East leaders. They are currently in playoff contention. So the Cowboys have a lot to improve before we can consider them a good football team. They took steps on Sunday. They were steps against the New York Giants, who are 0-5. One thing that was good on Sunday, although again, it might speak more to Daniel Jones than it does the Cowboys defense, is that DeMarcus Lawrence had a strip sack, which cornerback Anthony Brown returned for a touchdown. So on the bright side, a Cowboys defense that rarely gets turnovers, much less points off them, and DeMarcus Lawrence, who hadn't had a strip sack since a sack since early November of last year, did that. But the last time this happened was DeMarcus had a sack of Daniel Jones on Monday Night Football against the Giants in November, And another strip sack of Jones was the last Cowboys return for a touchdown. So you can't play Daniel Jones 16 times a year. I do think that the defense took some steps in their understanding yesterday. Jalen Smith did have a good game, which had been a question. Defensive coordinator Mike Nolan moved down to the sideline from the booth, which everyone was like, that can't fix all your problems. But DeMarcus Lawrence told us after the game that there were some in-game adjustments they were able to make. And I think especially in a year when you're, one, switching schemes, two, didn't have a full offseason, and three, are switching schemes from one that's just attack, go as fast as you can, be simple, to let's be more nuanced, Mike Nolan's got to stay down there. This team has some pieces. They want to rely on Zeke in the run game more than they had in the early part of the season when they kept falling behind. And doing that would take some pressure off Andy Dalton. Andy's also coming in with three insane receivers in Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb, all on the same team. A tight end in Dalton Schultz, who's really stepped up, and an okay offensive line. They're not what the Cowboys' offensive line will be or was. Tyron Smith and La'el Collins will hopefully recover in time for next season, but they still have Zach Martin out there and some guys. So, I mean, I don't expect this team to like pull off a Nick Foles type situation. Although if they do, it's interesting to think, again, the Eagles kept Carson, not Nick. I do think that in a weak NFC East, they should be in contention for the division at least through 2/3 of the season. And then we'll see from there.
So they have coming up the Cardinals on Monday night. Then they have Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have the Eagles. Then they go to the Steelers come to them.
Correct.
They have the Vikings. They have Washington again. So they don't have a really, really scary opponent. I mean, the Steelers and then the Ravens in week, what is that? That's the 1st of December. So I guess if there's any positive for Andy Dalton is that he can cut his teeth on the Cardinals and on Washington. Those are back-to-back home. Oh, no, one's at home, one's away. And then the Eagles, like this division. At least he has 3 games against teams that are kind of, up and down or bad before he has the Steelers and then the Ravens. But again, this defense has got to play better no matter who their quarterback is.
Right. Yeah, and I think that they're going to continue to get better. I do think they're starting to pick up the scheme. They're just doing it way too slowly. I think that the questions about effort that plagued them after a week 4 loss to the Browns, where they let up a franchise worst ever 307 rushing yards, I think that put fire in some of them. Maybe would be good if it put fire in all of them. And I do think that they're going to get some pieces back. So Lamar Jackson right now could probably run all day on this Cowboys defense, but Leighton Vander Esch should be back in the next couple weeks. Sean Lee could be back before they get to Baltimore. Randy Gregory's on the way, eligible as early as after this. He's got 1 more week that he can't play, and then depending on how he's doing, they could bring him back. They've got a cornerback, an offensive tackle, and so I do think that this team has kind of weathered it. I don't know. I thought it weathered its worst on Friday, and then it got worse yesterday. So who am I to know? But they've got some help on the way.
Gotcha. Now, how much of these defensive struggles are the fact that not only are they learning a new system, but are they still are they missing the pieces that are ideal fits for this system? Is this something that they're going to need another offseason of acquiring talent to actually plug in to do what Mike Nolan wants them to do? Or do they have the pieces they need? These guys are capable of fitting into it. Like the example, like when I covered Washington, 2010, Mike Shanahan came, had Jim Haslett as the defense coordinator, and they wanted to run a 3-4. But all their personnel was really 4-3 type of defense. And so they had defensive ends learning how to play as stand-up linebackers and, defensive tackles learning how to play as ends and all that kind of thing. Are these guys ideal for this system, or do they need to add more talent to it?
So the thing is, I've got some issues with your line of questioning because it suggests that at least one of those is going to happen, and that would put more belief in the Cowboys front office to get the personnel it needs than I am willing to do on October 12th, 2020. I don't know if it's a matter of personnel. I do think in terms of the defensive front and wanting to be multiple, they've got guys like Jalen Smith, Randy Gregory, Aldon Smith, Marcus Lawrence, who allow you some flexibility. Some of their versatile defensive linemen like Tyron Crawford are versatile, but he's going to be not elite in either way, or in either position, I should say. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's just a big thing is the players need to, one, buy in, and two, it's just hard to assess because if the coaches are saying, well, we don't want you to just act, we want you to think and act now based on the way the scheme sets up. Well, that's not what they're used to. So then the way the coaches have described it to us is you have a guy being like, okay, either he's hesitating because he's not yet confident in the scheme or understanding it fully enough, or his instincts start kicking in the heat of the game, and then he's playing this attack mindset that Rod Marinelli just drilled into them, and it messes everybody up. And I mean, what one of the players told us last week, Xavier was a safety, he said, we need to be all on the same page, because if we're all on the same page but one of us isn't, we're wrong. But if we're all on the same page that's wrong, we're right. And I'm like, I don't think that's how it works.
Right.
If we're all doing your own wrong thing, you're not working to the scheme. So they do need more talent. They really need help at defensive tackle because they lost Gerald McCoy in training camp, and then their defensive tackle Tristan Hill tore his ACL yesterday. And I think until they keep that defensive tackle position a little stronger, the linebackers aren't going to be able to do what they need to do at the next. I mean, it's a trickle down effect.
Right.
But I'm not confident that this offseason is going to get them the personnel. So.
Gotcha. Good deal. Well, Jori, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for all your insight. Best of luck to Dak, and we'll see what happens with this Cowboys team here. Tell everybody where they can find you.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Mike. And yes, I am on Twitter and Instagram at Jori Epstein, JoriEpstein. And like Mike, you can find my writing and videos at usatoday.com.
Good deal. Thank you, Jori. I will see you soon.
You bet. Thanks so much.
All right, I hope you guys have a great day. Sending our thoughts and prayers to Dak, regardless of what team you cheer for. It's hard not to feel bad for him in this situation. You hope that everything will work out. Again, you can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. If you have any questions, drop me an email at mjones@usatoday.com. Share this link of the podcast with some friends, and I will talk to you guys again next time.